So the way the Bhagavad Gita is structured, let me share this. Right, so we'll just do a quick summary of the Bhagavad Gita, summary view. We said the first 6 chapters is called the Karma Yoga section, primarily talking about who a Jivatma is. In chapter 1, Arjuna is lamenting that I really don't know what I'm supposed to do. What is my duty? I'm confused. And in early chapter 2, he asks Krishna, I'm surrendering to you. Now you can tell me, what is it that I'm supposed to do? Because I've been overcome by weakness. So essentially in chapter 1, Arjuna is lamenting that he does not know what to do. So the problem in the section 1 of the Bhagavad Gita is that the Jivatma has started by forgetting their identity. The Jivatma thinks that we are this body and we are not the spirit soul. And when the Jivatma is overcome by this kind of amnesia, where they have actually lost sense of who they really are, then everything else in life becomes a little complex and confusing. So the Paramatma's duty is to re-establish for the Jivatma what their real identity is. So once you know what your real identity is, then you can figure out what is the duty you have to perform, what's the knowledge that you need to perform this duty, what's the knowledge that you need both about yourself as well as the Supreme Lord. And if you work for Krishna, then what is going to be the outcome? What is the result that you will get as when you make a decision to work for Krishna? And then section 1 ends with Dhyana Yoga, which is talks about meditation as a way to achieve self-realization and realization of the Supreme Lord in the form of Paramatma. So from lamentation to identity being re-established, to understanding what one's job description is on the body, on the platform of the soul, what's the knowledge that one needs to perform this work nicely, to perform their duty nicely, and what is the result of working for Krishna, which results in peace. In that famous shloka that begins with Bhoktaram Yajna Tapasam, Suhridam Sarva Bhutanam, Jnatva Mam Shanti Rachati. So Shanti is the outcome of working for Krishna. Then in the middle 6 chapters, we said the main topic is Bhakti Yoga. But in Bhakti Yoga, 2 personalities are involved. The Jivatma and Bhagavan. And the Jivatma and Bhagavan have a relationship through the process that's called Bhakti Yoga. So after Krishna has told Arjuna, it's better that you work for me, Arjuna has to make a decision if it is worth working for Krishna. So in the middle section, he has to understand who the Supreme Lord is, who is his boss, what kind of boss is he going to be working for. If he accepts Krishna's invitation to work for him, what is Krishna going to give him in return? What type of insurance policy? And what are the terms and conditions under which the Jivatma gets to work for the Supreme Lord? Then, so it begins with understanding that Krishna is the absolute boss. He is Adi Deva, Adi Yajna, and Adi Bhuta. The insurance policy is that Krishna says that if you always think of me, then you will be under my protection. And then in the 9th chapter, which is called the most confidential knowledge, the password to unlock love of the Lord is actually bhakti. And throughout the middle 6 chapters, Krishna is actually talking about his opulence, both his impersonal aspect as well as the personal aspect. It concludes with the personal aspect. And so in the opulence of the absolute, Krishna says, if you think I am opulent, and if you think I am that great, can you imagine how great my devotees are because they have conquered me? So my devotees are greater than me because they have conquered me through the process of Bhakti Yoga. So which means that the opulence of the Lord is actually his bhaktas. And we talked about the Chatushloke, which is 10.8 to 10.11, 8, 9, 10, 11. And actually that the Bhagavad Gita begins in 2.11 and ends with 10.11. After that, it's just Arjuna asking a series of questions for our benefit. So Arjuna wants to know, he's curious, he's heard about this universal form. So in chapter 11, Krishna shows him the Virat Rupa form. The difference is that in this form, Kala is included, time is included. And time is essentially coming in the form of death. So Krishna shows him the Virat Rupa form, then he shows him the four-handed Narayana form, and finally back to the two-handed form. And the final chapter in the middle section, chapter 12, which is called Bhakti Yoga. So what are the Krishna Prema indicators? What is the manual that one has to follow? What is this process of Bhakti Yoga? This is described in chapter 12. So the final 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita is called the Prakriti Section. And it is also known as the Sankhya Yoga or Jnana Yoga section. So there is a lot more information about Prakriti, the 3 gunas, how they influence us, how the Lord is residing within us as the Paramatma, acting as a witness, but more than happy to guide us out of this prison house. This prison house is made up of the 3 bars, Sattvagun, Rajagun, and Tamagun. And to escape this prison, we need to follow the Vedic scriptures. And this is where the escape plan comes into place, which is not being caught up in the upside down banyan tree, going up the tree towards the real tree that actually exists in the spiritual world. And in chapter 16, we talked about the divine and demoniac qualities in each one of us. What qualities do we nurture and cultivate? And also, what kind of people do we choose to spend time with? That decides whether we are predominantly have characteristics of divine or predominantly have characteristics of demoniac. So it's both what you feed your own personality and what association you keep. And then yesterday we talked about the divisions of faith, where Krishna says the key actually to unlock that door, you've come to that prison door, you now need to unlock it to step out of the prison. And the key is that one must have faith in the scriptures. So Jnana Yoga means simply following the scriptures, the instructions in the scriptures. And in that sense, we talked about what is Om Tat Sat. Om means an invocation for the divine to be present, which is why every activity, auspicious activity that we begins with the syllable Om. Tat means saying that Nothing is my property. Everything belongs to Krishna. And therefore, everything I will use in the service of Krishna. And by using it in the service of Krishna, I will transcend the material world and get connected to the spiritual world. And Sat means completely surrendering to Krishna in that process. Right. Let me just double check something here. Yeah. So Sat is essentially anything and everything that you do gets spiritualized when you do it for the pleasure of Krishna. So these are the first 17 chapters. The 18th chapter is a fantastic summary of the entire Bhagavad Gita in the sequence in which Lord Krishna has spoken it. But before we come to the 18th chapter, a few quick points. What we talked about in chapter 17. In chapter 17, we talked about faith in the three modes, because Arjuna has a question. What about the people who do not have faith in the scriptures, but they have faith in their own capabilities or capacity or some other belief systems that is arising outside of the Vedic scriptures? So he asks, what about them? Are they in Sattvagun, Rajagun, or Tamogun? So Krishna says, well, it depends on what guna they're under. And in that context, he talks about various things like what kind of faith these people have, who do they worship, what kind of foods they eat, what kind of sacrifices that they perform. And sacrifices cover yajna, dhana, and tapa. What is the speech that they engage in? What kind of speech? What's their conduct? And how well are they able to control their mind? And we said yesterday that every one of us has to perform yajna, dana, and tapa. Yajna is performed to satisfy the demigods. Dana is done to please all of the jivatmas. And then tapa or austerity is done for one's own benefit. So the demigods, other jivatmas, and self. So yajna is aligned to the demigods. Dhana, one undertakes dhana or charity for the benefit of all of the jivatmas. And one undertakes austerity like fasting, waking up early in the morning, chanting 16 rounds, deciding that you will only honor prasadam. These are all austerities that are performed to benefit the self. So how do you benefit yourself? How do you benefit other jivatmas and living entities? And how do you also satisfy the demigods? So this is the reason it is mandatory for all of us to perform yajna, dhana, and tapa. But if you are a devotee, if you do Harinam Sankirtan Yajna, you automatically satisfy the demigods. So you don't have to do anything separately outside of this. So Krishna talks about the different types of charity. You should give it to the right person at the right place, at the right time, for the right cause. And we understand that by the time we come to the last shloka of chapter 17, Krishna has said, this yajna, dana, and tapa must be done to please him. If it is not done to please him, then everything else that you're doing is an absolute waste. There's no benefit. Physically, there may be benefit to the other person, that is the recipient of your charity. But for you, there is no benefit either in this life or in your next life. So all these three things must be done in alignment with the scriptures. So Prabhupada writes about the how actually charity works in Srimad Bhagavatam. So he says that if we give in charity to a non-Brahmana, we get the same amount in return in our next life. So it's a 1-to-1 ratio. Whatever we did, we will get that return in next life. 1-to-1. If we give in charity to a person who was a quasi-Brahmana, half Brahmana, not fully qualified Brahmana, then we get 1:2. If we give 1, in our next life we'll get 2 in return. If we give in charity to a qualified Brahmana, somebody who is a Brahmana, the return is 1:1000. So if we give 1 rupee, we will get a return of 1000 rupees in our next life. Not necessarily in the payment of rupees. I'm just talking about in terms of the ratio of benefit. So if you give charity to a qualified Brahmana, the return for you is 1:1000. So what is that? Non-Brahmana is 1:1. Half Brahmana is 1:2. Qualified Brahmana is 1:1000. And then, if you give in charity to a devotee of Krishna, the ratio is 1:infinity. The benefit to you is unlimited for multiple lifetimes. So this is how charity actually works, which is why Krishna insists the charity should be performed as per scriptures. It should be done for the right reason, for the right cause, and given to the right person at the right place at the right time. So we should be careful where we give our money in charity. So giving in charity to devotees who are propagating Krishna consciousness is the topmost form of charity, because the return is 1:infinity. Unlimited benefits you get for giving even 1 rupee in charity to a devotee. So, Desha, Kala and Patra is what Krishna talks about. One has to worry about the place, the time, and the circumstance when we give in charity. That becomes important. So also in chapter 17, Krishna is particularly saying he could care less about what philosophy you believe in or you follow. What he cares about is your practice. He doesn't care about your belief system. He cares more about how you're actually putting that belief system in practice. So, how do we understand imperfections in a person? So let's say you may be a very expert car driver, but if you don't have a destination that you're heading towards, although you may be an outstanding driver, you're not going to get anywhere. On the other hand, somebody may not be a good driver. Actually, they may be a horrible driver. They may even endanger others. But if they know where their destination is, they have a map, they have a destination in mind. So the question is, who is better off, a good driver or a messy driver? A good driver with no destination or a messy driver with the destination in mind? So it depends on the context. In the short term, it may appear that a good driver without a destination is better. But if you look at it from a long term perspective, a not so good driver with a clear destination is in a better position because they can transcend this material world. Essentially, what am I saying? I'm saying you can be a perfect human being, but if you're disconnected from Krishna, you don't have a destination to strive for. Otherwise, everything about you is perfect. But you don't have a destination, what's the point? Whereas a devotee can be imperfect, although Narayana, Bhudevi says to Narayana that the minute a devotee surrenders to Lord Krishna, there are no imperfections. All the imperfections are gone. So assume that you consider yourself to be imperfect as a devotee, but you are very clear in your destination. You are connected to Krishna and you're striving for Krishna consciousness. Krishna prioritizes this person than a person who's perfect and disconnected from him to a person who's imperfect and connected to him. This is the most important takeaway for us. But then if you're a devotee of Krishna, Krishna says you automatically have all the good qualities. So Prabhupada was asked, how do we get to know who your followers are? Some American asked him this question. To which Prabhupada says, the way you can recognize my followers is they are perfect gentlemen and ladies. Prabhupada didn't say the way you can recognize my disciples is they wake up at 3:30 in the morning. They chant 16 rounds. They fast on Ekadasi. They go out to distribute books. They read the scriptures every day. They preach every day. They take care of the deities very nicely. They only honor prasadam. Prabhupada could have given all these details, but he answered it in a simple way. Their conduct will tell you that they are my disciples. How will you know that they are my disciples? They will be perfect gentlemen and perfect ladies. Which means nobody cares in the outer world about what all you're doing as a devotee. Nobody cares that you wake up at 3:30 in the morning. Nobody is going to give you a medal because you're chanting 16 rounds a day. Nobody is going to praise you sky high because you're fasting for Ekadasi. But they will be attracted to you automatically if you are a loving, compassionate, caring person. This is how devotees of Krishna can attract Jivatmas towards them, making it easy for them to connect the Jivatmas back to Krishna. So while a devotee needs to be well versed in philosophy and must adhere to the rules and regulations, people are ultimately attracted to us because of our conduct. So I can wear a kanti mala around my neck. I can proclaim myself, oh, I've been practicing Krishna consciousness for 10 years now. Nobody cares if I'm practicing for Krishna consciousness for 10 years, but I exhibit all kinds of anarthas, then the world doesn't care. So Krishna is saying the same thing in chapter 17. You can do everything perfectly. But if you're not connected to me, there is no benefit to you in this life or in next life. So why not be connected to me and be a perfect person? So ultimately, this is the conclusion of chapter 17. So now, coming to chapter 18. Chapter 18 is called Moksha Sannyasa Yoga. And chapter 18 begins with a very interesting question from Arjuna. But before we begin chapter 18, let's offer our humble obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So I don't think this one has an acronym today, huh? Because this is essentially a summary. So Krishna, being a good teacher, being a good guru, is going to summarize whatever he's spoken in 620 odd verses in the same sequence, topic by topic. The teacher is going to summarize before he concludes his class. That's what good teachers do. So that's what Krishna is going to do. He's going to summarize the entire Bhagavad Gita, topic by topic. But let's see, what is the question that Arjuna asks in chapter 18? The perfection, the title of the chapter, what Prabhupada translates it as, the perfection of renunciation. So Arjuna is going to ask an intriguing question. He says, "O mighty armed one, I wish to understand the purpose of renunciation." Renunciation means tyaga. And of the renounced order of life, sannyasa. O killer of the Keshi demon, master of the senses. So why is Arjuna asking a question about two different things? Renunciation is a process. The sannyasa order of life is an ashram. Why? What is the relation between the two? Why is he asking this question? One has to do with process and one has to do with an ashram. But when Krishna answers this question, you will realize why Arjuna asked this question. So what is Krishna's answer to this question? Krishna said, the giving up of activities that are based on material desire is what great learned men call the renounced order of life, sannyasa. Which means a sannyasi gives up everything, including family, bank account, assets. They walk out of the house with nothing. And then they begin to serve society. That's what the sannyasis do. But what is tyaga? Krishna is saying, giving up the results of all activities is what the wise called renunciation. So the difference here is that it is not your position that matters to Krishna. It is your disposition that matters to him. When Krishna is answering this question, it goes back to the first and second chapter where Arjuna has said, it is better for me to put my weapons down and even give up my life, or better for me to go into the forest and give up my kingdom. Go into the forest means, give up my kingdom means taking sannyas. Krishna is saying, better than taking sannyas is for you to stay as a Kshatriya and simply renounce the results of all of the activities, like Janaka Maharaj. So Krishna is saying, your disposition is more important than prematurely trying to go into a higher position, because sannyasi is considered the highest ashrama. So this answer is connected to what Arjuna has said in chapters 1 and 2. And then from here, Krishna is going to begin by talking about Karma Yoga, which is in chapter 3. So from shlokas 1 to 12, Krishna is going to summarize Karma Yoga again. Then from shlokas, it is not reflected on the slide. I am reading off my notes. So then from shlokas 13 to 17, Krishna is going to talk about the jnana of a karma yogi, the 5 factors of action, which we will read quickly. Then from shlokas 18 to 40, Krishna is going to talk about the second part of the jnana of a karma yogi, which is the modes and how they control you. Then from shlokas 41 to 48, Krishna is going to talk about Karma Yoga offered to Krishna, which is essentially chapter 5. Then from shlokas 49 to 55, Krishna is going to talk about Jnana Yoga combined with a little bit of Bhakti, which we call the Mishra Bhakti. And then from shlokas 56 to 78, Krishna is going to talk about Bhakti Yoga. So like this, logically, Krishna is going to walk through everything that he has spoken about. He will give a few additional details as he goes along when he talks about the gunas and other things. He will also come back to the topic of varnas. He will say what kind of jobs Brahmana should have, what kind of jobs should Kshatriyas have, what kind of jobs should Vaishyas have and Shudras have, etc. So there's some additional detail in chapter 18. So to the question, which is better, Tyaga or Sannyasi, Krishna has responded by saying, Tyaga is better than you becoming a sannyasi. Learn to be wherever you are and simply renounce the results of your activities to please me. So the focus is not on one's position, the focus is on one's disposition. So essentially Krishna is saying, being renounced without taking the sannyasi robe is auspicious, is very good for society, is good for that human being also. One can be a sannyasi by simply renouncing all activities, but not going away from society. So the Bhagavad Gita culminates with Krishna talking about surrender to me. So whatever fruits of the work that you get, you should offer it back in Krishna's service. That is Tyaga. And so now let's look at the slides. I see. So there was an acronym, SMILE. Summary of Karma Yoga, the modes of nature, an ideal worker, love of God, and the results in the end. So Krishna talks about what is true renunciation. Acting with detachment is true renunciation and brings freedom from reaction. Freedom from reaction means a karma. Detached from fruits, but not those activities themselves. Renounced order of life, sannyas, and renunciation of fruits of action, tyaga, are one and the same. But Krishna says the preference is you do the second. Preference is don't become a sannyasi prematurely because you really have to be qualified to take on the sannyas robes. You have to achieve a certain level of perfection before you become a sannyasi. And because not all of us are perfect, Krishna is saying better you be where you are and simply learn to do tyaga. Work performed in this way is renunciation in the mode of goodness. Nahi deha brata shakyam.
Nahi deha brata
Yaktum karmanya sheshatah.
Yaktum karmani sheshatah
Yastu karma phalatyagi.
Yastu karma phalatyagi
Satyagiti abhidhiyate.
Satyagiti abhidhiyate.
Krishna is saying it is indeed impossible for an embodied being to give up all activities. But he who renounces the fruits of action is called one who has truly renounced. So he is saying giving up all activities means trying to become a sannyasi is very difficult. Very, very difficult. That's why less than maybe 0.01% of the population would be sannyasis, or 0.0001% of the population would be sannyasis. It's a very difficult thing to do. Better, Krishna says, is simply just renounce the fruits of your action. Such a tyagi is quite perfect, as perfect as a sannyasi. So Krishna then talks about one who thinks himself the only doer, not considering the 5 factors, is certainly not very intelligent and cannot see things as they are. So what are these 5 factors? Let's just quickly look at that. Oh yeah, before we do that, there is some important shlokas here, which is not on the slide. Krishna says renunciation are of 3 kinds, as per the scriptures. And then Krishna, remember yesterday, we were saying that yajna, dana, tapa have to be performed. Nobody else is saying it. Krishna himself is saying it. Look at shloka 5. Acts of sacrifice, charity and penance are not to be given up. They must be performed, Krishna is saying. Even if you're a sannyasi, you have to perform it, Krishna says. Even if you're a self-realized soul, you still have to perform it, Krishna says. Indeed, sacrifice, charity and penance purify even the great souls. All these activities should be performed without attachment or any expectation of result. They should be performed as a matter of duty. That is my final opinion, Krishna says. So Krishna is saying whatever yajna, dhana and tapa that we should do it to please him, and we should do it as a matter of duty. We must do these 3 things. That's what Krishna is saying. You must do all 3. So as we said, yajna is done to please the demigods. Dana is done to please the other jivatmas. And austerity is done for the benefit of self. So that is Krishna's final opinion on these 3 duties. Then Krishna comes back. Prescribed duties should never be renounced. If one gives up his prescribed duties because of illusion, such renunciation is said to be in the mode of ignorance. And then anyone who gives up prescribed duties as troublesome or out of fear of bodily discomfort is said to have renounced in the mode of passion, which is what Arjuna was doing. I'll run away, I'll go away. Such action never leads to the elevation of renunciation. O Arjuna, when one performs his prescribed duty only because it ought to be done and renounces all material association and all attachment to the fruit, his renunciation is said to be in the mode of goodness. Let's come to the shloka that I was looking for. There are 78 shlokas, so obviously we cannot see every shloka. Yes, so 13 and 14. O mighty armed Arjuna, according to the Vedanta, there are 5 causes for the accomplishment of all action. Now learn of these from me. Which means when you perform an activity, the outcome is influenced by 5 things. Which is why repeatedly Krishna says, do not worry about the outcome. Just perform your duty, but do not worry about the outcome. Do not be attached to the outcome. So what are these 5 things that influence the outcome? The place of action meaning the kshetra meaning our body, the physical body. The performer meaning the soul occupying the body. The various senses, the 5 senses including the mind. The many different kinds of endeavor, actual karma or actions that you're performing. And ultimately the super soul. These are the 5 factors of action. Of these 5 factors, the super soul plays an important role in deciding the outcome. Therefore, Krishna repeatedly says, you must do your duty, you shouldn't worry about the outcome. So he's saying anybody who knows this, they are very intelligent. Anybody who knows this understands that the Supreme Lord has a predominant say in your outcome. You can only act, but the Lord decides the consequences. Whether the consequences are positive or negative is in the Lord's hands. So one should not think that we are independent. Because if you think you're independent, then you're working in the mode of ignorance. We'll not go over each of the shloka, we'll just read the English translation because this particular chapter has more slides. One who's not motivated by false ego, whose intelligence is not entangled, though he kills men in this world, does not kill, nor is he bound by his actions. So Krishna says here, if your intelligence is fixed up in Krishna consciousness, you are not motivated by any material desires. You may kill on the battlefield, but you are not bound by that killing. You may kill, but you're not killing. Because Krishna is doing the killing. Therefore, he is not bound by karmic reactions. So Krishna then says that he is the ultimate cause. So a person performing Krishna consciousness is not bound by any activity. They are not responsible for their actions. That doesn't mean we willfully disobey the Lord. That's not the mood of a devotee. They know and accept that Krishna is the supreme cause. They do not get distracted by the fruits of their activities. They are not motivated by false ego, and their intelligence is not entangled. That was the previous shloka that we just read. So from shlokas 19 to 40, Krishna is going to come back to Sattvagun, Rajagun, and Tamagun and their influence on these areas. Knowledge, the kind of action, understanding, determination, and happiness. So let's quickly look at the gunas again. So Give me 1 second. So when it comes to knowledge, a person in the mode of goodness sees everything as the spirit soul. A person in the mode of passion sees different souls in every body based on duality. So most of us would be in the mode of passion. Why? Because when we see a butterfly, we are very attracted to a butterfly. We say, ah, so beautiful. Look at the pattern. Look at the colors. How beautiful is the Lord's design. But we don't react the same way when we see a cockroach. Although cockroach also has the super soul within it. We don't admire a cockroach, right? We admire butterflies. But a person who's in the mode of goodness does not see any difference between the butterfly and the cockroach. They only see the spirit soul within that particular Jivatma. Ignorance. We are attached to one kind of work as all in all, materialistic. Action. A person in the mode of goodness is regulated. They have good habits. They develop good habits. They perform their duty without love or hatred. They are not resentful of their duties. They are detached from the results. And most importantly, they perform their duty with determination and enthusiasm. What about the person in the mode of passion? Krishna says, what are they doing? They're always chasing things. They always want to gratify their senses. That's because they are operating from false ego. They are very much attached to their work and they are very much attached to the results of their work. They tend to be greedy. They tend to be envious. Krishna says they are impure. And they are very easily moved by dualities like joy and sorrow. What about the person in the mode of goodness? Whatever they do, they are operating under illusion, without regard for scriptural injunctions, without concern for what activities that they're doing is going to yield what karma for them. They don't even care about that. They are also envious, but their activities causes violence or distress to others. They are engaged in activities that are prohibited in the scriptures. They are also very materialistic. They are obstinate. They engage in cheating. These are the people who are in the mode of ignorance. What about understanding? The people in the mode of goodness, Krishna says, they know clearly what is to be done and what is not to be done. Which means, remember in one of the classes that I said, as you chant more, you will develop discriminating capacity to know what you're doing is right or what you're doing is wrong. So the more you chant, the more you read the scriptures, you will self-correct. And when you self-correct, it's a wonderful feeling rather than to wait for somebody else to criticize you and tell you what is it that you're doing wrong. So this is when you are in the mode of goodness. You also know what is it that you should fear and not fear. What should you fear? Giving up Krishna. What should you not fear? Working for Krishna. What is binding and liberating? Whereas if you're in the mode of passion, Krishna says, you are unable to distinguish between what is religion and what is irreligion. You do not know what should be done and what should not be done. And the worst is, if you are under the influence of tamogun, you flip it. Whatever is irreligion, you believe that is your religion. And whatever is religion, you believe is irreligion. Why? Because you're operating under illusion and darkness. Therefore, you're always headed in the wrong direction. You may be a smooth driver, but you're headed in the wrong direction. What about determination? Krishna says those who are in the mode of goodness, their determination is unbreakable. They are steadfast. They know how to control their mind and therefore their senses and their life. What about the person in the mode of passion? They are all about economic development, this development, that development, sense gratification, holding on to the results of their activities. For the person in the mode of ignorance, Krishna says they don't go beyond dreaming. They can lament, they are depressed, they operate under illusion, they are filled with anxiety and fear. This is the position of people under the mode of ignorance. What about happiness? This is an interesting shloka. Krishna says, for those who are in the mode of goodness, whatever austerities that they perform in the beginning may be poisonous in the beginning. Like waking up early in the morning. Who wants to wake up at 3:30? Especially in winter time. So certain austerities that a devotee practices can be poisonous, Krishna says, or can appear to be poisonous in the beginning. But as they stick to it with determination, it ends up being nectar. And therefore, it results in self-realization. They understand that they need to perform austerities for their own good. Whereas people in the mode of passion, they are attracted to everything. Everything tastes nice, beautiful, wonderful. It ends up becoming poisonous in the end. Why? Because they are trapped. There is no end to this game. Everything looks attractive to them. But in the end, they are sorrowful and unhappy about what they get. And they think they can fix it by chasing something new. So sense gratification is the name of the game for people in the Rajagun. For people in the mode of ignorance, since they are in illusion anyway, there's no concept of happiness. They spend most of their time sleeping and being lazy. Then, who is an ideal worker? So here Krishna is going to talk about the 4 varnas and how do they attain the supreme. So let's go to these shlokas. I want to specifically read the varnas. 41 to 55. We will not read all shlokas. We will come to the shloka on varna. So Krishna will again summarize, peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, knowledge, wisdom, and religiousness. These are the natural qualities by which the Brahmanas work. What do the Kshatriyas do? Heroism, power, determination, resourcefulness, courage in battle, generosity, and leadership are the natural qualities of work for the Kshatriyas. Then, farming, cow protection, and business are the natural work for the Vaishyas. And for the Shudras, there are labor and service to others. So Krishna is saying, by following his qualities of work, every man can become perfect. And then Krishna says, now please hear from me how this can be done. Which is, if you're Shudra, how can you achieve perfection? If you're a Vaishya, how can you achieve perfection? Simply by performing your duty very nicely. So Krishna is saying, you have to add worship. By worship of the Lord, who is the source of all beings and who is all pervading, a man can attain perfection through performing his own work. Then, this is the second time Krishna is saying this. It is better to engage in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. So Krishna is saying, if you are a Kshatriya, you be a Kshatriya even though you may not be a perfect Kshatriya. but don't pretend to be a sannyasi, even though externally you may be doing it very perfectly. So as per your birth, the mode that is influencing you, and the kind of work that you do, or that you're attracted to, or you're naturally inclined to, that determines your varna. So stick to your varna, Krishna is saying. Duties prescribed according to one's nature are never affected by sinful reactions, which means being a Shudra, there's nothing wrong in being a Shudra. You can be a Shudra and the greatest devotee of the Lord. Everybody does not have to be Brahmana and cannot be Brahmana. So this concept of caste system is a pollution of what Krishna speaks about in the Bhagavad Gita as Varna Ashrama. That is just a man-made way to discriminate. Caste system is very discriminatory. Krishna never speaks about discrimination in the Bhagavad Gita. As a matter of fact, he's saying even a Shudra can be a devotee. And then Krishna says every endeavor, which means everything that we do is covered by some fault. Which means upfront Krishna is saying nothing that you do is going to be perfect. Just as fire is covered by smoke. Therefore, one should not give up the work born of his nature or son of Kunti, even if such work is full of fault. One who is self-controlled and unattached and who disregards all material enjoyments can obtain, by practice of renunciation, the highest perfect stage of freedom from reaction, which is akarma. And then he talks about action. Being purified by his intelligence and controlling the mind with determination, giving up the objects of sense gratification, being freed from attachment and hatred, one who lives in a secluded place, who eats little, who controls his body, mind, and power of speech, who is always in trance and who is detached, free from false ego, false strength, false pride, lust, anger, and acceptance of material things, free from false proprietorship, and peaceful. Such a person is certainly elevated to the position of self-realization. One who is thus transcendently situated at once realizes the supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments or desires to have anything. He is equally disposed toward every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. So, this is what Krishna is speaking about. An ideal worker is that worker who sticks to his varna and does his duties and responsibilities, even though it may be done with imperfections. So we covered this. Krishna is telling you what kind of occupation you should have. If you're a Vaishya, Shudra, Kshatriya, or Brahmana. So the best way to perform one's work is to perform it for the pleasure of the Lord. We'll come to this important shloka in 55. Bhaktya mam abhijanati.
Bhaktya mam
abhijanati.
Yavan yaschasmi tatvatah.
Yavan yaschasvatah.
Tato mam tatvato gyatva.
Tato mam
tato jnatva.
Vishate tadanantaram.
Vishate
tadanantaram.
So Krishna is saying, one can understand me as I am, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of me by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. So Krishna is saying, who can enter the spiritual world? Only his devotees. You can practice Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, and all kinds of other yoga. You do not get entry into the spiritual world. Not my interpretation. Krishna himself is saying that. So what is love of Godhead? Krishna is giving us hope. And it ends with surrender. So let's quickly read these shlokas. So Krishna says, if we depend on him, if we follow his instructions, if we do this under the guidance of a bona fide guru, and we have to act while remembering Krishna all the time, what is the result? The result is you get the personal protection of Krishna. You will easily pass over all obstacles, even in the current life. And Krishna will personally take you back home, where you belong. So Krishna is now going to talk about Bhakti Yoga. Though engaged in all kinds of activities, my pure devotee, under my protection, reaches the eternal and imperishable abode by my grace. In all activities, just depend upon me and work always under my protection. In such devotional service, be fully conscious of me. If you become conscious of me, you will pass over all the obstacles of conditioned life by my grace. If, however, you do not work in such consciousness, but act through false ego, not hearing me, you will be lost. Krishna is saying, I am giving you a lot of instructions in the Bhagavad Gita. But if you choose to disregard my instructions, Krishna says, you will be lost. Then Krishna is warning Arjuna. If you do not act according to my direction and do not fight, then you will be falsely directed. By your nature, you will have to be engaged in warfare. Krishna is saying, Arjuna, you are a Kshatriya for the rest of your life. You can't give up the need to provide good governance. You may give up this battle, but in the future, you will fight somewhere else for a kingdom. And then he's telling Arjuna, under illusion, you are now declining to act according to my direction. But compelled by the work born of your own nature, you will act all the same, O son of Kunti. So Krishna is saying, I am telling you to fight. You are refusing to fight. But I am telling you, even if you don't follow my directions, you will still end up fighting somewhere along the way. Because it's your nature as a Kshatriya to uphold Dharma. Then Krishna talks about the Paramatma. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities, who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. Directing means whatever desires you have, the Paramatma sanctions it as long as you have the credits for it. O scion of Bharata, surrender unto him utterly. By his grace, you will attain transcendental peace and the supreme and eternal abode. So Krishna is saying, at least you surrender to Paramatma. You can achieve the result of peace, and ultimately you can come to the eternal abode. Then Krishna says, thus I have explained to you knowledge still more confidential. Deliberate on this fully, and then do what you wish to do. See how sweet Krishna is. After talking 700 verses, Krishna is saying, I have told you what I needed to tell you. Up to you now what you want to do. So unlike the Bible, there are no commandments in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna has given Arjuna multiple choices, multiple options, that he can choose from. Krishna never forces us to do something that we don't want to do. He's so compassionate, he's telling Arjuna, you think before you act. I have told you what you needed. Then you do as per your desire. Then Krishna says, because you are my very dear friend, I am speaking to you my supreme instruction, the most confidential knowledge of all. Hear this from me, for it is for your benefit. So Krishna is now going to give him a little bit additional confidential knowledge. This is a repeat of the shloka in 9.34 with a slight variation. Krishna comes back to these 4 simple instructions for Arjuna. Always think of me, become my devotee, worship me, and offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. This sentence, I promise you this because you're my very dear friend, is not there in 9.34. Krishna is giving you a double promise. He's saying, if you follow the simple instructions that I'm giving you, these 4 things, if you do, you will come back to me, and I'm promising you that you will come back. And you will come back to me without fail, which means have faith. When you're practicing Bhakti Yoga, have faith that Krishna will take you back. Krishna is in control of your life, and he will guide you back to the spiritual world, as long as you allow him to guide you. Then the famous shloka, abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. Then some interesting shlokas here. This confidential knowledge may never be explained to those who are not austere or devoted or engaged in devotional service, nor to one who is envious of me. So Krishna is saying, I have revealed a lot of confidential information to you. Make sure you don't speak to those who are not interested in me. And then in the next shloka, Krishna says, for one who explains the supreme secret to the devotees, pure devotional service is guaranteed. And at the end, he will come back to me. Krishna is saying, don't preach to non-devotees, but preach to devotees. Because if you preach to devotees, through the process of preaching, you will achieve pure Krishna Prema. Guarantee, Krishna says. But the devotees of the Lord violate this instruction of the Lord. Can you tell me why? Although Krishna is instructing us, do not preach to those who are envious, to those who are not interested in spirituality. This is the only instruction of Krishna that the devotees do not follow. Why? Why do we violate this instruction? Hare Krishna. Anybody? Somebody? Are you all awake?
Maybe we are not aware of this 67 sutra.
I'm asking, why do we as devotees violate this one instruction that Krishna is giving?
Because they are compassionate.
Ah, yes. Because a devotee is more compassionate than the Supreme Lord. A devotee is paradukha dukhi. Paradukha dukhi means a devotee feels extreme distress seeing the other jivatmas in distress. And therefore, they will go and preach to them and say, come and surrender to Krishna. Just chant the holy names of the Lord. Here, take some prasadam. Come to the temple. Enjoy the activities in the temple. So a devotee will always try to attract the jivatma back to Krishna. We don't care whether the jivatma is a devotee or a non-devotee. We do not discriminate. Because the devotee is more compassionate than the Lord. So to summarize this one shloka, we preach to outreach, because preaching is an outreach program. Krishna is saying preach. We prefer to preach to everybody and anybody. So because we prefer to preach to anybody and everybody, we are breaching this particular instruction of Krishna. So we preach to outreach. All along, Sanjaya is violating this instruction. Dhritarashtra is not a devotee of the Lord. But as the Lord is preaching to Arjuna, Sanjaya is preaching to Dhritarashtra. He is telling him verbatim what the Lord is saying. So he is also trying to convert Dhritarashtra into a devotee of the Lord by simply relaying whatever the Lord is saying. Dhritarashtra is not a devotee of the Lord. Sanjaya is. So from the very first shloka, Sanjaya has violated this instruction. 67. Because he is preaching to the Dhritarashtra. All this confidential information is revealed to the Dhritarashtra. So Krishna says, preaching should be done to devotees. And this is what devotees like about Krishna. Krishna says, there is no servant in this world more dear to me than he. And then he's eliminating all other exceptions. Nor will there ever be one more dear. So he's saying, those who preach this knowledge are most dear to Krishna. And then as if to emphasize, he's saying there is nobody else who's more dear to me than my preachers. Preaching does not necessarily mean just teaching the Bhagavad Gita. Preaching includes giving the Bhagavad Gita in somebody's hand. Preaching includes distributing prasadam. Preaching includes deity worship. Preaching includes inviting people for registering for classes. So the word preaching is quite broad. And then Krishna says, if you can, you should preach, because if you preach, you are very dear to me. But if you can't preach, next shloka. And I declare that he who studies the sacred conversation of ours worships me by his intelligence. Krishna is saying, if you can't preach, at least study the Bhagavad Gita. Because if you're studying the Bhagavad Gita earnestly, Krishna is saying you're actually worshipping me, but you're worshipping me by using your intelligence. Then Krishna says, well, if you can't study the Bhagavad Gita, next shloka. And one who listens with faith and without envy becomes free from sinful reactions and attains to the auspicious planets where the pious dwell. Krishna is saying, for those who even hear the Bhagavad Gita with just a little bit of faith, they may not even practice anything else. Just by listening to the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is saying they go to the planets where the rishis reside. Imagine, just with a little bit of faith, hearing the Bhagavad Gita alone, Krishna is telling you what your destination is going to be. Then can you imagine if you're studying it? Then can you imagine if you're preaching it, what your destination is? O son of Pritha, O conqueror of wealth, have you heard this with an attentive mind? And are your ignorance and illusions now dispelled? Krishna is asking Arjuna, I hope you've been paying attention to what all I've been saying. And if you paid attention, then hopefully your ignorance and illusions are now dissipated. This is the first time Krishna is asking a question in the Bhagavad Gita. Actually, he asked a rhetorical question, right? In one of the chapters. Why are you asking me this question? So Arjuna said, my dear Krishna, O infallible one, my illusion is now gone. I have regained my memory by your mercy. Remember, we said he had amnesia in the first chapter. So now he's saying, I have regained my memory by your mercy. I am now firm and free from doubt, and I'm prepared to act according to your instructions. Please notice, Arjuna doesn't say, I'm ready to fight. He says, I'm ready to follow your instructions. That is a devotee. Sanjaya said, thus have I heard the conversation of two great souls, Krishna and Arjuna. And so wonderful is that message that my hair is standing on end. So after hearing this divine knowledge, Sanjaya is experiencing bliss. My hair is standing on end, he's telling Dhritarashtra. By the mercy of Vyasa, I have heard these most confidential talks directly from the master of all mysticism, Krishna, who was speaking personally to Arjuna. O king, as I repeatedly recall this wondrous and holy dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna, I take pleasure being thrilled at every moment. So Sanjaya is relishing this conversation between Krishna and Arjuna over and over again. O king, as I remember the wonderful form of Lord Krishna, I am struck with wonder more and more, and I rejoice again and again. So he's saying, just observing the beautiful form of Lord Krishna on this battlefield, it's just given me such bliss. And the very last shloka, again a very famous shloka. Wherever there is Krishna, the master of all mystics, and wherever there is Arjuna, the supreme archer, there will also certainly be opulence, victory, extraordinary power, and morality. That is my opinion. So Sanjaya concludes, and the Bhagavad Gita concludes with Sanjaya's opinion. Throughout this, after all this, has Dhritarashtra's mindset changed? No. Why? Because he's envious of Lord Krishna. Krishna says, if you are envious, you cannot recognize me as the Supreme. So envy is the only emotion that can never be used in the service of Krishna. So Krishna in this chapter is essentially respecting our free will and independence. He is not imposing his will on you. He's given you the direction. He expects you to use your intelligence, make the right decision, and act. So you deliberate and you act as per your desire. That's what he tells Arjuna. So which means the Bhagavad Gita appeals to human intelligence and it acknowledges human independence. This is the words of Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. So I'll repeat again. Bhagavad Gita appeals to human intelligence. Bhagavad Gita acknowledges human independence. Bhagavad Gita is about choices and consequences. Krishna has given an array of choices for Arjuna to choose from. But at the end, he leaves it up to Arjuna what choice he wants to make. So Krishna has just given us various choices that we can make and the consequences of the choices that we can make. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita, there are no commandments like the Bible has 10 commandments. The Lord is appealing to our intelligence. The Lord is appealing to our sense of maturity. Commandments are necessary when the maturity level of the population is low. Then you should simply tell them, do this, don't do this. Don't worry about the why behind the sentence. Or don't worry about the why behind the instruction. But when you're talking to intelligent people, you cannot impose your will on them. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita has no 10 commandments. It's about choices and consequences. We have to contemplate and choose. So a few more points and then we will end. I think I can take a few minutes. So one of our Acharyas, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, writes in his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, that Krishna's heart fills up with compassion for his devotee. And Krishna says, "O Arjuna, I will tell you the most confidential knowledge because you are most dear to me. And I am determined to love you as opposed to you being determined to serve me." Krishna says, I am more determined to love you than you are determined to serve me. This is one of the Acharya's commentary. That is how immense the Lord's love is for us. Krishna is showing his compassion for us by saying, just worship me, bow down to me, offer me something, and become my devotee. The other thing I wanted to say is, when Krishna says, Sarva Dharman Paritibhya, Mam Ekam Sharanam Vraja, Aham Sarva Papebhya, Mokshashyami Ma Shuchaha. What does that mean? Is Krishna saying, give up dharma and now engage in irreligion? No, that is not what Krishna's instruction is. What Krishna is telling Arjuna is, I have spoken and given you a lot of information. So there's a lot of information overload for you. By the time you process it and try to understand it, it may be many, many lifetimes. So Krishna in Shloka 66 is saying, forget about the intricacies of what I have told you. Don't worry about the technicalities of what all I have told you. You can give up all of the technicalities, set it all aside. But you do one thing and one thing alone. You don't have to follow Karma Yoga. You don't have to follow Jnana Yoga. You don't have to follow Dhyana Yoga. You don't even have to become my devotee. You don't have to perform even Bhakti Yoga. You do one thing and one thing alone. Simply surrender to me. If you surrender to me, you are immediately under my protection. So he doesn't say, become my bhakta first and then surrender to me. That's not what Krishna is saying. He's saying surrender first. The rest of the things don't worry about. Obviously, if you surrender to Krishna first, automatically you will become a devotee eventually, right? What else is there to do? So Krishna is saying, don't worry about all of the technicalities that I have given you so far. If everything that I've said is overwhelming to you and is confusing to you, then do one simple thing. Surrender to me. That's what he means by give up all religions. Which means give up karma yoga, give up jnana yoga, give up dhyana yoga, give up bhakti yoga also. If you can't even perform the simple bhakti yoga, at least can you take my shelter? It will benefit you if you take my shelter. So, this is the final act of love of the Lord. He's saying, yes, you're my little child. You may not be able to meet all my expectations. So I've constantly lowered the expectations until I've told you, just be under my shelter. Just like the father always takes care of the child. Krishna is saying, be under my protection. At least that you can do. So, we talked about where Krishna says, share this knowledge. If you can't share this knowledge by preaching, study it. If you can't study it, at least hear this. And then he says, I hope your doubts have been cleared. Krishna was ready to speak the Bhagavad Gita all over again. If Arjuna had responded to the question by saying, no, I still have doubts, Krishna was more than ready and happy to speak the Bhagavad Gita all over again. That's how compassionate he is. So Arjuna concludes by saying, I will do as per your will. He does not say, I will fight. So Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, again, he's got a beautiful way of summarizing things. He says, Bhagavad Gita is neither a call for violence or silence. Bhagavad Gita is neither a call for violence or silence. Silence means accepting adharma. Violence means protecting dharma here in this case, to use violence to protect dharma. So, what is Bhagavad Gita? It is neither a call for violence or silence, it is a call for transcendence, meaning we all must elevate our consciousness. We must go beyond worldly considerations of profit and loss, victory and defeat, violence or silence. We must focus on transcendence. And what is the best way to serve the divine? To simply say, I will do as per your will. So while Sanjaya's heart becomes transformed after hearing the Bhagavad Gita, Dhritarashtra's heart is not transformed. And then the Bhagavad Gita ends with the prophecy that whoever and wherever there is Krishna and Arjuna, there is prosperity and victory. So simply turning towards Krishna can empower us in all situations. So with that, we come to the